Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Ge Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Tuesday, March 18th. Spring practice starts for Notre Dame tomorrow, Jamie. And so we are going to talk about that. We've kind of gone position by position throughout the offseason, and now we're just going to talk main themes of kind of what we want to hear about. I don't know what we want to see because we're not going to really see anything until later in spring ball, but what we want to be hearing, right? Things that we want to be hearing, kind of make some predictions, sort of, not really predictions, but how we envision things playing out. Just best guess kind of on the position battles, quarterback, offensive line, DB, D tackle, defensive line, whatever it might be. So we're going to talk about those things. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. If you like what you hear, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is we are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. And as always, the show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You see ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2025. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Sly Fox, thank you for being here. It says I did a great show with Tyler. I did Tyler Wojak's Locked On Irish yesterday, posted this morning. So check it out. Little spring preview there. Check us out there. It's always good stuff. Happy to do the show with Tyler. Jamie, how you doing? How are things?
Doing great, man. It's sunny here. Yeah,
we love that.
Just enjoying it. Yeah,
it's sunny here too. Last week, raining all over the place, ruining all of my baseball watching plans. My children's games were canceled. My daughter's football game was canceled. We haven't played in 2 weeks because of rain, Jamie. It's ridiculous. Why am I paying all this money to live out here and I'm getting rained out?
Also, they canceled the football game because of rain.
So the way it works is that we practice at a middle school, and the schools are very protective of their fields, right?
Oh, okay.
And if you saw, like, the games start at 4:45. I want to say there's 15 fields. The games start at 4:45 and they go all the way to 8:55. Like, they will get destroyed. So I kind of understand where they're coming from. It's just a bummer, right? We haven't played in 2 weeks. The girls are getting rusty.
Yeah,
Jamie. But we don't want the Notre Dame football team to get rusty. So they are starting spring ball tomorrow. And there's just a quick PSA for everybody. Jamie and I are going to change our show schedule this week a little bit. We're gonna do a show tomorrow after Marcus Freeman speaks to the media, which I believe is around 10:15 Eastern time. So we should be able to go our normal noon Eastern. That should work out really nicely. So we'll react to what he says. Anything that the media might see. I think we get first 4 periods tomorrow. So whatever we might see there, Matt will be there. He'll be on hand. So we'll get some updates there, and then we'll react to what Marcus Freeman says to open spring ball. So just PSA for everyone. Live show tomorrow, noon Eastern time. Jamie, you excited? I think it's a fun spring that we've got coming up. A lot of intriguing things. Let's just jump in with quarterbacks here. Okay. 3 quarterbacks. To give people a little bit of, we talk about reps a lot and how there's not a lot of reps. Kind of walk people through what a spring practice format is, right? Just in terms of why are there limited reps? How do the reps go? How does the practice usually comport itself? How many reps would you expect each quarterback to get, just on a day-to-day basis, right? Just like, this is the work that you're getting. This is how the staff goes about evaluating the quarterbacks. Because I think we talk generally about how practice goes, but I think because we come from a place of knowledge, we've participated in these types of practices. You've seen these types of practices when you've attended Notre Dame practices. But I don't know that everyone has like a full working knowledge of how the practices actually go.
Yeah, so it's obviously it's different in the spring than in the fall. The only thing that's like the same is when you first started, you're not
Yeah.
advanced, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the main thing. Obviously, when you're getting to fall camp, which who knows why it's fall camp. They started in August. It's not actually fall, but they call it fall camp. And
Because you're prepping for the fall.
I guess just call it training camp or something. But I don't know how it happened. Um, you're hitting the ground running way more at that
Yeah.
point, right? Because you have first of all, there's so many guys that are early enrollees now. There's far fewer guys that come in at the June time. You
Mhm.
know, there's some transfers, there's some still some freshmen, but most of your team is in there for the spring, so they've been around. So there's a lot less of uh, install, or a lot of the install stuff that they do in the spring. It's like, okay, these guys who come in the summer, it's like on them to kind of catch up. They kind of have to do it. They start off a little bit slow. You don't go right away to 100 miles per hour, but you are taking it in a different thing. Spring is different because you're coming into it. Obviously, you only get so many opportunities. So you want to take advantage of these opportunities,
Yeah.
but you're not throwing at guys on the first couple days like crazy stuff. Like you're not doing too many different coverages on the back end when you do any sort of like team 11 on 11 stuff, which you will do on the first day, but it'll be limited, right? It'll be limited. There's going to be a lot of individual, right? There's going to be a lot of individual. There's going to be a lot of, stuff where you're working like with the, position groups together. Maybe you're working like, back seven together.
Yeah.
Uh, you're working, front seven, like front six, like, stuff when you're going through like running through pressures and different things. They'll get into different things as you go along, as you go like the few practices in, all of a sudden you're just putting in nickel, you're doing this, you're doing that, right? You're doing all these. I mean, nickels were base, but I meant like more like sub packages for third down stuff. You're putting in third down as you go along, but you're not really like fully into it like right away. So it's kind of like a run before or walk before you run type
Mhm.
type of deal, right? Um and but the one thing I'd say with, they seem to be way more on top of it now than they've ever been before. Like I remember like going to early practices and before, where it was just seemed like, wow, this thing was just really slow. It was like, kind of like uh, the level of intensity. People are excited to be back out there, but the level of intensity is there, and it's different now. Like the level of intensity will be there. Um, it's gonna, guys are obviously gonna like take command. Obviously, there's such a big thing with winter workouts and guys that kind of already establish themselves as like, kind of like group leaders, and then guys who already become like leaders of the team. So and also there's so many guys returning this year that we're already kind of like prominent voices. So I think they're gonna be pretty good. Like right away, I would say that first 4 periods, you're not going to see much in the very first 4 periods of that first practice. Don't expect a ton of feedback from Matt or anybody else who is there to kind of tell you like this is exactly what's going on. He's basically going to say like, hey, XX in this did this, they're healthy. All these guys sat out. Well,
Yeah.
these were on the list of whatever.
Yeah.
If there's someone who was on the list of like, hey, this person wasn't on the list of they're missing, that kind of thing. Also, you're going to see like physical development of some guys that just look different, that you really just haven't seen in a while. So, I mean, perfect example, Logan Thomas. That's a guy I want to see. I want to know what he looks like. I want to hear about what he looks like coming out of it. Obviously, he like made a big jump from last spring to the summer. Well, where is he going to be at now? Because a lot of that's going to, dictate how much he kind of gets into the mix this year, right? So I think it's going to be it's and then always too. there's always new guys, right? There's the early enrollees.
Mhm.
There's the transfers that are there. And that's always just fun to kind of see what those guys look like in a Notre Dame uniform for the first time.
Yeah, I think the good thing about this year is Notre Dame has a lot of players that are looking to get into the rotation next year for the in the spring and into next year, because like when you have an experienced team, like the last time Notre Dame was playing, like they were in the playoffs, like they played for the national championship, right? Like they played so many games. If you have a lot, and I'm talking about just making spring kind of the more useful for people like us who want to evaluate things, right? It wouldn't be it wouldn't be bad if like, Howard Cross and Riley Mills and Xavier Watts are coming back. It would just mean the spring is a little bit just really de-emphasized because those guys don't need it. They just simply don't. And you can't get those players to raise their level of intensity for spring practice. That's just not a thing. But when you have and someone who just kind of pops my mind, like Logan Thomas is one, right? Like he wants to be a major player for Notre Dame next year. He can't take spring off. He can't take it lightly. First person player that comes to my mind is like Cam Williams. Like Cam Williams, it's like, okay, this is an important period for you. That it's not for Jaden Greathouse, right? It's not really for him, but for you, this is big. Logan Saldate, big spring. Micah Gilbert, these are big reps that he's about to get against Leonard Moore and Christian Gray as kind of like the number one boundary guy. Like this is a huge spring for him, and Notre Dame has a lot of players like that in the spring, so that's very good, right? In terms of getting practice, have it be crisp, have it be competitive, right? And interesting for whenever we get to see and whatever we get to see, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just kind of interject too, because I think it's like a really important is one thing you kind of see that's established is you see the guys who are vets, the returning guys, like it would have been Xavier Watts last year, right? Obviously the JD Bertrands before. This year, I mean, a guy like Drake Bowen is one of those guys, right? Like Adon Schuler is one of those guys, right? Like, there are guys like that I think, like, I mean, Jeremiah Love, and even if you could say like Jeremiah Love isn't going to do maybe everything, right away, there still has to be guys who set the tone for everything, not just the team, but like the position groups in general. And one thing that has always stuck with me, and this is before, obviously, I was doing this job, but I went to the coaches clinic back in, I guess it was 2009. So it was Charlie Weiss's last year, right? And Michael Floyd, just watching him, and we got the chance to watch practice there. Michael Floyd, just watching him, the guy ran through bags, like agility stuff, like it was the friggin' Super Bowl.
I remember hearing about this, actually.
He was 100 miles per hour all the time, like, and just was like, he's going to shame people if they don't try to at least pick it up, right? And I think that's one of the things that made Michael Floyd a great player, right? Is that he had all this physical ability, but he also had that like desire to kind of like do that and take everything that seriously. And it's just something that I think they're like, you're going to have coaches who are going to have a ton of energy, and they're going to bring the energy if you're not getting it from certain guys. So like Al Washington, I mean, he's a guy, he's going to be like in their face. He's going to be like, go, go, go that whole time. But it's going to be, sometimes it's like on the players to kind of lead and really like take advantage of that. And I think like you just see it over time. And I always enjoy that kind of seeing like, who is the person that you're like, takes the lead and does that. And usually it's everyone who you think it is. Like, I think of like 2019 and just Aloy Gilman and Jalen Elliott in the safeties thing. And obviously Kyle Hamilton he stood out. I mean, he stood out. But when you look at like, as they were doing individual, Elliott and Gilman really stood out because they were just like, just the way they worked everything, and everything was so precise. And just like, or the year before that, it was Coney and Tranquil, and they were just like on this. And you just want to see that kind of thing, because when you know that's gonna when you see that from people, you just know that, hey, the guys who were great last year, I mean, they're gonna be even better because they have that kind of level. They take it that serious.
What do you expect from, I guess, each quarterback in terms of what do you feel like they need to be focused on? I guess each one, like how does each individual quarterback kind of go about separating themselves from the others to the extent that they can, right? Especially, I mean, I don't really mean tomorrow. I just mean throughout
camp.
Yeah.
I think one of the things is that it's like you're obviously going to be graded on everything.
Yeah.
It's so hard to get into, like, when every throw matters, right? Every throw matters, everything there. But you also have to remember that it's practice and you're still like trying things, because that's what practice is about, right? Like you're trying to maybe, like, you wouldn't make that throw in that same thing, but you're testing your abilities to see whether or not you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's what I want to see from a guy like Steve Angeli is you just want to see total command of everything. And that's should be an expectation that he should have that. And I think one of the things with Angeli, you can see that when he steps into a game, pretty much every time he stepped into a game, he's accurate. He looks just cool, like totally in control, like just comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, not to get into it, but everyone would say maybe, hey, too comfortable in the pocket sometimes, right? But I think that's one of the things that you want to just see is this is a guy who's in total command. Because when I think when you've seen him in practice, he's been good in a lot of practices, but he didn't look like, there was no point when you saw him last spring was with the ones where he looked like he was the starter. Like he looked like he is the guy, right? Like, so I think for Angeli, it's like about like, hey, perfection almost. Like you got to be like that guy all the time. And the stuff with like, the pocket awareness or whatever and all that kind of stuff, you can't do that early on, especially when you're just, I mean, you could do certain things, but it's like when it's not pads or whatever, like it's not quite the same, right? It's not quite the same. And they're not going to make these guys live. They don't want to hurt anybody. But it's going to be important where they're going to have to like really grade like that kind of thing of being like, well, that would have been a sack in the game, because you have to take that into account with him. So I think obviously that's probably like, up there in list, but just having that full command. And I think
let me do a quick question from Sly Fox, because I think the biggest thing with Angeli is pocket awareness. And he asked you, can you teach pocket awareness? Let me add to this. Can you go from bad to good?
I think
you can teach it, but like, can you go from a bad pocket awareness guy to a good one?
I think you can. I think that's possible, right? Like, I think that's possible, but it's not easy. It's not something that's like, it's not something that automatically clicks for guys, because some guys never get it, right? Yeah. Like Jeff Sims, who we talked about on another podcast, right? Like that guy never had it. And that is like one of his number one things that he never had in his, like, even despite the guy has a rocket arm, he's can run, do all these different things. It's not even about like, the Shark 83 says, Angeli's not a twitchy athlete. Yeah, he's not a twitchy athlete, but you don't have to. That's got nothing to do with pocket awareness, because Tom Brady.
I was about to say Tom Brady is slow as heck. And
elite pocket awareness.
Yeah.
Elite pocket awareness. Like you have to have that the feel, but also like you want to talk about improving a pocket awareness. Brady Quinn.
Yeah.
Brady Quinn. Yeah. Look at Brady Quinn, but prior to Charlie Weiss, and then when Charlie Weiss came in, and how that changed him, and how he was different. Right? It was significant. It was significant, and he wasn't a guy who was like escape, do all these kind of crazy things. I mean, he was like an above average athlete, or at least an average athlete.
Yeah.
But he definitely wasn't a dual threat or anything like that. He wasn't a guy who was like Houdini in the pocket, but he was able to kind of find things and refine it, and he learned a lot in that aspect. So Angeli has to do that. I don't know if he will, but it is a big thing on his list. And kind of transitioning to the other guys, I think the other guys are the guys who athletically they can do more, they can escape more. Yes, they have that, but also too, like I feel like both of those guys have better just awareness there of like a better feel for the rush. Like you just see it with them. Obviously it's different when it's like you're going against the ones, and that can change that too. So they have to keep that kind of stuff, and they have to keep all these things that make them contenders for the thing. Like Minchie has to be a great athlete, and he has to be able to run, and he has to be able to create, things outside of the framework of the play, right? And same with Carr. Like Carr has to be able to, have that kind of like innate feel for the pocket. He has to be able to throw well on the run. He has to be able to do all of these things. But it's about like it's all these other little things that lead up to it, like getting into the right check, making sure that you're always into the thing. You have the right protection called. So and it's going to be different center, right? Like Otting is going to be probably getting the most reps out of anyone at center. So that's going to be a thing where like that quarterback has to be in control of that. And if they're not, that's how you do end up getting sacked, even for the guys who can escape and have a better feel for it, right? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on. I think it's about Carr and Minchie. It's about like, don't make the mistakes. Don't make the mistakes like your protections, all this, your control of this. And yes, use your arm talent, make that throw that maybe Angeli can't make. I think for the most part, he can make just about every throw that they make, but just saying like the ball pops a little bit more with those guys. I would say when you watch the throw live, and it's about making those throws, but it's also about like, here's my limits. This is where I can go above my limits here, but I can't. I got to keep it here. Or I got to know when to check it down, or I got to know when to do this and that, right? Like it's about decision making. And that's part of what made Riley Leonard so good, right? And Parker Flammang, who's like a big, obviously, analytics guy for everyone who follows him, Stats of War on Twitter is a great follow. He had this thing about 12%, and it's about like limiting the basically mistakes on offense, and teams that do that and are under 12%, that's like you're doing it well.
And you're talking like penalties, sacks, lost
penalties,
yards,
sacks, yeah, like negative plays, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, any
negative
kind of
plays, right? Play. And so much of that falls on the quarterback. And if it's funny because I was looking at it, and he had the list of and I'll write about it in 6 Thoughts, but he had the list of the Power 5 or Power 4 teams, and they're all listed there. And Notre Dame was, I believe, 20th, which is pretty good. And obviously, a huge part of that was, I think people might have it in their heads that Notre Dame was worse at it because when they did it, it was like the drive was dead. But that was the perfect example of like, you notice when the drive was dead because they didn't do it as much. They still were, successful most of the time, and were able to move the ball and score and do all these things. And Leonard did such a great job of limiting all of these like kind of negatives, or getting them out of negative plays, whether it's just like escaping and like sometimes, a 2-yard gain, you're like, okay, whatever. Well, that kept the drive alive, or that kept this, that didn't allow, gave the field position, whatever. He was able to do that. So that's what I think you hope that guys like Minchie and Carr really learn the most from working with Riley, learning from him, is that part of it. And Angeli too, really, because like Angeli, sometimes, what? Angeli, I think one thing that Angeli is, you don't want to you don't want to dull a strength. Like you don't want to get something that he's really good at. And one thing he's really good at is the rush is in his face. He's not looking down. His eyes aren't down. His eyes are down the field. You don't want to lose that because you want to be able to make those throws. And sometimes those throws can win you games, right? Like that. It's the difference between winning and losing is like keeping your eyes downfield when the rush is in your face, especially if you're getting pressured a lot. At the same time, you have to know that, well, I'm waving the white flag on this play or this is my clock and I got to wave the white flag here. And you have to know like when to throw the ball away, when to just like step up and take a 1 yard scramble instead of, getting sacked for -5 or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that is the thing that all of those guys, you hope they incorporated it from Leonard. And it's not easy. It's not like osmosis, but that's something hopefully, they should learn how valuable that is because it's huge. And so I mentioned Notre Dame's 20th. Near the bottom, Texas, Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the thing. He took too many sacks. He made throws that he shouldn't have, where he'd make a bunch of great throws, but he also threw the ball. I was like, nah, I should do it. And then obviously too, they had some other things, mistakes with just discipline penalties and all that kind of stuff too. But like, you just wouldn't expect a team that was in the semifinals, like really like we're very close to like tying up the game against Ohio State and, taking that, getting to the championship rounds with them at the end of the game. And you wouldn't expect that from them. But the reason why they weren't a national championship team and why they were like destined to lose to Ohio State or whoever they played at some point, whether it was Ohio State then or Notre Dame the next week or the week before or whatever, was because of the stuff they did on offense.
Yeah. When you talk about, limiting the mistakes from, I guess all of them, but specifically from Minchie and Carr, you said, like, it's about the administrative errors. I think that's the ones that coaches cannot handle. Like you said, you want to take your chances, right? Like you want to try to fit the ball somewhere within the framework of what the play call is supposed to be, right? But it's like first of all, just before the ball is snapped, like getting everyone lined up, giving everyone set, make sure the operation is clean, things of that nature, protections, all those things. But like knowing where to be looking, right? Knowing where the ball should be going, where you should look. Like don't throw that ball in the flat when there's clearly a sitting defender and you're throwing a pick six. Like unacceptable. Like there's acceptable interceptions and there's unacceptable interceptions. There's unacceptable mistakes that quarterbacks can make. Like you can't have those because that's the one their coach is like, nah, if I can't trust you to not do that, I can't trust you, period. That's the thing that'll keep you off the field. If you're like, hey, I saw this and I knew that the corner was playing this kind of coverage and I wanted to take a shot on a 50-50 ball in the corner, made a play or whatever, the coaches will live with that sort of thing, right? Because they can just tell you like, hey, it's better to do this, and to be coachable. If you're like, hey, the post is open, you need to throw the post. Why are you throwing this crosser with the linebacker sitting right there? Like that's the sort of thing where it's like, you're not ready at all, and that's the sort of mistake that I think that you're talking about with these guys. And, it's, again, because of the format, it'll really be interesting in terms of, I said on Tyler's show yesterday, the thing with Minchie is I don't think because, a lot of people say, well, he can't run in the spring or whatever. I think that's actually to his benefit because everyone knows that's possible, right? Everyone knows that's in there. You got to be like, let's work on the throwing part. The thing is like people have always loved his arm. People has always loved his throwing ability. And I think someone asked a question a couple weeks ago about, his offense. They ran a lot of RPOs and when he was in high school. And so this is an area where I feel like maybe he can excel over someone like Angeli, who Bergen Catholic really did not do this. I can't remember. I want to say CJ Carr did some of this in high school, but I know Kenny Minchie did a lot of it. I think that's an area where like Notre Dame likes running RPOs. Mike Denbrock likes running RPOs. This is something where, Kenny Minchie can excel there. So it'll be interesting, right? I don't believe there's going to be any sort of starter mentioned. I mean, Notre Dame might not even want to tip their hand to any of these guys and kind of show them like, hey, like any of you can still win the job. Like Notre Dame wants all three quarterbacks back. They know that's not possible, right? It's just not practical to have all three come back. And then you have Hebert and you have 4 scholarship quarterbacks going into the fall. Like there's just no way. But they don't want to.
It would be a surprise if it happens.
Yeah, like it's not a practical thing. It's funny. It's not practical, but I can't really say this guy is definitely leaving. Like that, if you ask me to say if it's going to be Angeli or Minchie, I don't think Carr is, but like Angeli or Minchie, I don't know. I could see reasons for both of them to stick around in a scenario going into the fall if they can still win the quarterback job. So,
one thing too, I just wanted to mention with Minchie, because I think people just like forget too that he wasn't a guy that, I mean, he was a good athlete, but he wasn't like if you watch like Lamar Jackson in high school, you were like, oh my God, this guy's a devastating runner. But that was like, like he needs to work on throwing, but he's a devastating runner, like just an unbelievable zone read guy. And Minchie, it wasn't like he was like, well, he's just running all over the place. Like his film is like, he is like layering throws, incredible touch. I mean, I'm trying to find it. I can't remember, but I think he might have won like the accuracy thing at Elite 11.
I think that's right. I think that's right. Yeah.
So like, and like anyone who's seen him, like in terms of arm talent, like he can sling it. Like he's got a gun. So it's not a thing where, if he doesn't, if he's number 3 at the end of spring and he leaves or whatever, or he doesn't end up, winning the job or whatever, it's not because the guy doesn't have the talent to throw or whatever. It'll be about other things, about like, hey, maybe these other guys making, he made too many mistakes, or he did this or that or whatever. It's not going to be because of anything, because he really like, he also is like one of these guys that if he doesn't end up like playing at Notre Dame, he could go somewhere else and be awesome. Like that's still, on the table for him.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued by his abilities and his skill set. I don't know. To me, he's like Everett Golson to me. And just in terms of like the way that he can throw the ball, how it looks coming off his hand. I think he's probably bigger than Golson was. So, that just I would like to see it. It'll be interesting. I hope he gets I don't want to say I hope he gets a fair shot. I think they'll all get a fair shot. It'll just be interesting. Someone, I think Terry Tyler said, Carr is not the next Trevor Lawrence. That sounds like a straw man. I don't think anyone ever said he was the next Trevor Lawrence.
What?
We don't know what he is. We have no idea. All I'll say is, behind the scenes, the excitement around him has been present for a long time. People are expecting a lot of really good things from him going forward. Jamie, you mentioned that Joe Otting would get the majority of snaps, or would be getting a lot of reps at center position. Do you think Anthony Knapp will kind of get some work there? I think that's kind of been bandied about as just like it's been speculated about to the point it almost sounds like it's like a prediction, like it's gonna happen. And I don't know. I was talking to Tyler about this. Like, will he even play center? He could. Why wouldn't he just stay at left tackle? He had a very good season at left tackle for a first year guy. What does he look like physically, right? From a upper body standpoint, like, did he get bigger That'll be interesting to monitor. Anything like what's intriguing to you about the offensive line and that all situation?
Yeah, I think people are kind of like saying that this will happen. It's just kind of like everybody said it about Robert Hainsey. And I mean, fair enough, right? Like
Yeah,
I always thought that I was like, I think his probably best position would have been center, but you know, they didn't have anybody better at right tackle, so he was the right tackle, right? So I think that might be the reason to give Knapp there, but also remember that Knapp isn't going to probably be fully available until later in the spring based on kind of what the update that they gave. So they might give him some reps there, but they might also just want to be like, hey, well, we'll look at it more in fall camp if we want to or something, right? Like, because we don't know how they're going to treat we don't know how they're going to treat the thing that's what makes it so interesting, because we don't know how they're going to treat all these other guys. Like, are they just going to say, it's easy to just say Charles Jugusa, well, started left tackle in the national championship game, did a really good job for someone getting thrown in there, and was supposed to be the left tackle. Well, he's there.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at like kind of because Schrouth is going to be the same and similar thing with Knapp, right? Like he's going to come back later on in the spring too. So they're going to want to have like a certain quality of guy at guard too. And they might just think too, like if they feel that Jagusa is like, well, I think he can be a really good left tackle, but he could be Quentin Nelson at guard, you might just put him there, because you might also think, well, Gerby, like we want to see what Gerby can do. We want to see what Gerby Lambert can do at left tackle. So we want to see that, right? So I think there's like, spring is the time to experiment. They can try all these different things, right? They can do all these different things if they want to. And I would kind of expect, especially the fact that you look at Jagusop, like, playing right guard in the Orange Bowl and doing well, and then playing left tackle in the national championship game. You can move him around from practice to practice if you want. It's fine, And if before they kind of decided he was going to be the left tackle, well, in camp and when he was a true freshman, his very first year, he started out at tackle, and then all of a sudden they were like, well, let's work him at guard. So they can move him around and do a lot of different things. But I think so much of it's going to depend on, well, what's the health of Schrouth and Knapp, and when these guys are like able to kind of like fully be integrated to be able to kind of practice again. And also too, like, what are you getting out of like someone like you expect a certain level out of like Sullivan Absher. Like you expect him to like, okay, I think he's going to be a guy who can, even if he doesn't become a starter level guy, we can see if he's that this spring. So he is going to get a ton of first team reps, I think, in the spring. But also too, like, what if like say Styles Prescott, who missed most of his first year because of injury, what if he comes out and they're like, oh wow, like Prescott is like really like looking like something, right? And also it depends too, because like Auding could come in and be like, he might look great, and they're like, wow, we feel great about Auding. But if he doesn't look great, then it all obviously changes. So I think the good news is they have the options to kind of move and shift guys around. Obviously there's early enrollees there too, which I think like I don't see any of the guys like Augustine, like I think, could he be the Knapp of this year and be the surprise? Maybe, right? Like I definitely think he was underrated, like from his like national ranking. Like he could be somebody, and I heard like really good things about him like prior to like him signing, that like he is going to be somebody who's like more ready than people think. But there's all these kind of things where like where we don't even know how, like Peter Jones is just basically like a forgotten guy. But Chris Terek was kind of a forgotten guy. Then all of a sudden he was like, I know he's hurt for this camp, but like all of a sudden Chris Terek, you're like, Chris Terek is like, might be pretty good. Like
he was a mainstay with the second team. I mean, that was as much as anybody else, right? As much as Absher, as much as like Gerby Lambert, right? You know, there's no reason that he couldn't be in that conversation. But for, you know, the physical attributes that other players have.
Yeah. And just one other thing too, because I see like Terry and Michael, they're arguing about, you know, Knapp and Jagasaw. Just remember, like Blake Fisher was the left tackle, and it was like, wow, he was kind of like established the left tackle. He was like doing great, won the job as a true freshman, was like doing really well against like Isaiah Foskey in camp, and everyone was like that. Well, and then obviously he was hurt, missed pretty much all of his freshman season, came back for the bowl game. But Joe Alt came in and they were like, well, we're not moving Joe Alt from left tackle, you know? So it all depends how they feel in the moment. Right. And they do like Knapp a lot. So it's not a slam dunk that they're going to move anyone anywhere. And I think I just have a feeling that however they line up the first day could look way different by the end of spring.
Yeah, by the end of spring, by the start of fall camp,
all of it. Yeah,
like the offensive line.
I love to pick the predict the starting lineups, offensive line early. It's nothing I love more in life.
They have so many options. It's like you said, Jagasaw can play a number of positions, right? I think Anthony Knapp probably could. Listen, good offensive linemen generally, like I don't want to say, you know, every left tackle can be a good center, be a good guard or whatever. Like someone like Anthony Knapp, I feel like wherever you play him, he's going to be good. Like he's a good football player, right? Yeah. So that's important, you know, and comparing him to Jagasaw is kind of like, doesn't really matter. Like he's a good player on his own in a vacuum. It would be surprising to me if he was not like a key player for Notre Dame on the offensive line next year. But like, it also would be surprising if Gerby Lambert didn't take a big jump, you know, or Jagasaw, or even Absher. Like Absher, like to me, he is one where they could leave the spring and think to themselves, we do not know what to do with him. Because he could just be great in the spring. It's like, but we're going to play him over Strouth. We're going to play him over Jagasaw. No, right? But like, is he really not going to play? He could do that. He has the opportunity to do that. He's going to get the reps for it because Strouth is not going to play as much. And it's like a natural fit for him to just get those reps, right? So it's kind of the same thing with Gerby Lambert, right? If Anthony Knapp isn't, and you have Gerby Lambert at left tackle, he's playing really well. What are we going to do, right? Offensive line is not a position where it's like D-line, where it's like, oh, we'll just rotate every other whatever. That's not a thing. Again, Emil Wagner played almost every snap last year, played more snaps than Xavier Watts did, led the team in total snaps. If you're good on the offensive line, you play as you don't come out, right? So that's one where it's like Notre Dame could find themselves in a situation where to quote The Wire, it sounds like one of them good problems, right? And that's where, you know, Notre Dame could find themselves. And that's like, you know, look, that's what Notre Dame wants, right? Like if they are going to be if they're going to be an offensive line program, right? An offensive line type of, offensive defensive line type program. That's what Marcus Freeman wants. And so, you know, that they can make moves on that front. You can make moves for your social media company or your social media page, your small business, your highlight reel, whatever it might be. If you need to make those moves with VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh, VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Jamie, any other, what are your final kind of, our last discussion point here, just like overall spring? What do you want? What is simmering in your mind? What are you focusing on? What's kind of on your mind here as we look forward to tomorrow?
I mean, a couple more things. Really, the kind of like the competition at defensive tackle, because I think that they have like a ton of options there, and it's about kind of sorting through like who are the best and which who are going to be those guys. And it might not. I wouldn't expect it to all get sorted through in spring, because also too it happens, especially with some of these guys where they take big jumps from the spring to the summer and going forward. There's guys who make big jumps during the season. Like, so there's a lot that can go on between then. Like, no one last spring was talking about like, man, you know what? I really think Donovan Heinisch is going to be like probably like the next best pass rusher out of the defense line. No one was talking about that, right? So there's a lot that can kind of go on there, and I'm really kind of intrigued by what like you're gonna get out of, I think, Rubio, Heinisch, Dawson. Even I would say what you're gonna get there, and then it's like, well, can you get more than that? And then it's like, well, what is Anya gonna look like? Is he gonna look like that guy who was like having a breakthrough thing, or is it like, man, he was away and was trying to getting back on the field and getting comfortable, right? And what is Mookum going to look like a dude that is ready to play? Is Hughes going to be ready to play? So I would think that there's just like, there's a lot of intrigue there of like someone could really just like jump the line and do something, right? Like guys are going to, I would say there's a baseline of 3 guys that are going to be in the rotation for sure. And then it's like, okay, well, let's see who's going to be the best, and let's see how many guys can actually be in the rotation. And then the other thing is like, what guys take that step to be just flat out dudes? Like they just are really like kind of going through that where, like coming back into this year, and you can look at just say like Leonard Moore, he doesn't need, I mean, expect that anytime you see him in the spring, he'll be like, well, there's Leonard Moore doing his thing. Kind of like how it was the expectation every time you saw Ben Morrison. You're like, well, of course, Ben Morrison was one of the best guys on the field. Yeah. So I think that should be an expectation for someone who played that well as a freshman. But I mean, I know that, he's going to be probably one of the guys on a pitch count, but like Bryce Young, is Bryce Young like really going to take a jump? Is like Josh Burnham, who's someone that he started last year. I think most people would be surprised he was second on the team in tackles for loss and tied for first amongst with Riley Mills for Havoc plays, and he played like 70 less snaps than him. Like, is he going to be a guy who like takes a jump and all of a sudden he's like an alpha guy on the D line, right? Like, is KVA going to be like, oh my gosh, he's going to be there? Is there going to be the freshman, or the young guys that really kind of like step up? Like, obviously we're excited about Micah Gilbert, and we think like, man, he has a real chance to do it. Like KVA is another guy, right? Like all of these guys. And I think that's what makes it so intriguing, because that Notre Dame is coming off such a great year. They had an awesome year last year. They're bringing so much back. And they have a chance to be really, really great this year. And there's so many guys on the team that were like pretty good or like good contributors that are candidates to make that like jump into like, oh, they're going to be like, go from like solid to like very good, or like maybe even solid to like, this guy just jumped up 2 levels. Right. Yeah. So, I'm super excited about that, because I really think there's a ton of candidates, which is why like I think like we'll see. Obviously, they got to play the season out, but I just think on paper, it's just one of the rosters where it's like, I think it's like one of the most loaded rosters. It's probably the most loaded roster, top to bottom, that I would say that they've had since I've been doing it. Is it the high end? Can it be the high end of like a 2015? Can it be the high end of like a 2018, 2019? I think it's actually on the table. With more depth.
When was the last time Notre Dame had a running back room this good?
Yeah, it's probably, early 90s.
You'd have to go back to like the 96 Kinder Farmer, Denson, Mark Edwards.
Probably.
You'd have to go back to that.
Yeah.
Those are some really good teams. In 2000, they had Julius Jones, Tony Fisher, Terrence Howard. That was a good three-man rotation there. But like the high end of like Jeremiah Love is just like hard to look past. And like Jadarian Price too. Like on another year. It's funny. Like people talk about like, what Jeremiah Love would have done with the 2017 line. I feel like Jadarian Price with like his running style and just like that straight ahead, like, just running through huge creases. Like he would have done numbers for that 2017 line, like the 2015 line as well. Like he's a 1,200 caliber yard back, which is like, but he has Jeremiah Love there, so it's just like it's not there. But like they are loaded in that spot. I feel like their offensive line. This could be like a really special. Whoever ends up in the spots, like it could be a special group.
And it could be special for a couple of years. Like it's
yeah.
Well,
oh yeah. Like it's funny. Like they could be special, and this is probably going to be the worst that this unit is going forward. It could be really, really good. Wide receiver, right? I love Micah Gilbert. I think he's going to be kind of the talk of spring. It's just a guess, and it's only based on not really things I've heard, just my impressions of him as a player and what he's ready to do. And I think the opportunity he has, I think he's going to be the talk of spring. Saldate and Cam Williams are super intriguing to me. Faison, and Faison is good. We know Greathouse is good. We know Malachi Fields, like he can play, right? Like he's had 800 yards the last 2 years in Power 4, right? Like he's a good football player. Will Paulings had 900 yards at Wisconsin. Like we know he's a quality wide receiver at the college level. It's like you said. I think with Christian Gray, like what does he look like physically? I'm curious to see how physical leaps that he's taken. Is he kind of solidifying his game, right? Like he had a very good season last year. Minus some really bad, loud moments, but like he had some of the highest moments too, right? Like, wins the game against Texas A&M, wins the game against USC, wins the game against Penn State, right? These are 3 plays that you could make in your entire career and have it be good, and he did it one season. So, but like, does he solidify his game, right? Things like that. KVA, another one. Adon Schuler, right? Do those like the Bowens, the KVAs, the Schulers, like do they take charge of the defense? There's a lot, man. There's a lot to be excited about with this spring, the spring ball, and things that we could hear. And obviously, there's some live periods, but hopefully we're gonna get to see a lot more later in the spring, and we can talk about that. Anything else before we get going, Jamie? I know you gotta go.
No, I'm just ready to go. Like I don't expect we're gonna get too crazy of an updates tomorrow. Obviously because it's only the 4 periods that they're gonna give. Luckily it's after stretching, where I know some places they do 4 periods, but you get 3 periods of stretching, so it'll be 4 periods after stretching. But you know what? I'm curious to hear. We haven't heard Marcus Freeman talk in a while. So
about the team.
about the team. He's
Yeah.
obviously going to get asked about. We didn't talk about it today. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but like, they made a
hire.
a hire, which I'm super intrigued by, and I think Jordan Blake from Colorado, who I think is what I've read from him. It sounds like the exact type of guy that you're kind of, if you're looking for like a Chad Bowden replacement in that type of relationship building and all that kind of thing, like he sounds like the perfect kind of guy there. And they're obviously making some other hires. Mike reported on the board that it sounds like Myron Tagovailoa is going to be hired in the personnel department too.
Yeah.
So that's exciting for everyone who's
that's like might sound random, but he's like kind of an up and comer in the industry, like really big time. So, and plus like the Polynesian connection too.
I think
like
it's huge. You
Yeah.
absolutely, like it's just one of those things too. And obviously they have the players.
Right.
They have a bunch of Polynesian players on the team. The one thing is like, anyone who's seen KVA's mom, she's very active on Twitter.
Active on the
she's very active, super nice lady. She's very active on Twitter, recruiting for Notre Dame. She's very pro Notre Dame. But so but when there's someone who's working in the program that is, Polynesian and stuff too, that helps. And obviously he's not just a guy who just working in the program. He played, he was successful. He was a multi-year starter, very good player for Notre Dame too. So always like it when there's guys who, able to come back in whatever role. And I love that there's, a number of guys, former players, in recent years who have just, whether, they're doing stuff on the field or off the field, like Amir Carlisle's role and all that. Like, I think it's always a cool thing.
Yeah. So we'll be monitoring all those things, and we'll be discussing those things. We'll be back tomorrow, 12 Eastern time, to talk about the opening of spring practice, Marcus Freeman's comments, and whatever we observe at the practice. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you for listening to our show. Hit the like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. So whenever it is, we are going live again. That'll be 12 Eastern tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.